In their 4th year of marriage, Marcus discovered a pregnancy test in his wife's luggage after her month-long business trip. When he saw the digital display showing 3+ weeks, a cold smile spread across his face. He personally prepared Elena a nourishing bone broth, then forwarded her lover's STD test results to the man's entire company. Chapter 1. Thunder rolled across the evening sky as rain hammered relentlessly against the windows, each drop striking like tiny fists demanding entry. The apartment lay mostly in shadow, with only the television's flickering blue-gray glow illuminating half of Marcus Reid's face. He sprawled across the couch with one leg draped over the armrest, mechanically pressing the remote buttons without truly watching anything. The wall clock's second hand moved with agonizing slowness, each tick a needle prick against his already frayed nerves. Nearly 11 o'clock. Finally, the metallic scrape of a key turning in the lock broke the silence, followed by the deadbolt clicking open. "You're back," Marcus said without shifting his gaze from the screen, his tone deliberately flat. "Yeah, completely exhausted." Elena's voice carried the weight of bone-deep fatigue, as though the rain had drained every ounce of energy from her body. Her heels clattered against the entryway tile before she kicked them off, padding forward in damp socks. She dragged a large rolling suitcase behind her, its wheels grinding harshly against the hardwood floor with a sound that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Marcus glanced toward her. She wore a beige trench coat, the shoulders and hem darkened to a muddy khaki where the rain had soaked through. Wet strands of dark hair clung to her forehead and neck. "This rain is absolutely brutal," she muttered, wrestling with the suitcase. "Couldn't get a ride for over an hour, just stuck there at the terminal." Frustration crept into her exhausted voice. "I told you flying in on the red-eye was a bad idea," Marcus said, finally turning to look at her properly. His tone remained neutral, as though commenting on something entirely mundane. Elena didn't respond, merely grunting as she hauled the heavy suitcase into the living room. She began shrugging off the wet coat with impatient, weary movements. "I'll take that." Marcus's voice softened slightly. He stood and approached her, his fingers grazing the back of her cool, damp hand as he took the coat from her. The fabric felt heavy and cold, carrying the smell of rain and urban grime. "Thanks," she mumbled, already kneeling to unzip the suitcase. The zipper tore open loudly. She immediately began rummaging through the contents. As Marcus carried the coat toward the balcony, his eyes involuntarily drifted downward to the open suitcase. Inside lay a chaotic jumble: clothes, a toiletry bag, several unopened bags of specialty coffee beans from Seattle. And there, tucked beneath a pile of colorful underwear, was the corner of a small white cardboard box. He could just make out the distinctive dark blue lettering. Marcus's mind went blank for a split second. He recognized that box immediately. He'd never purchased one himself, never had reason to, but he knew that shape, that unmistakable logo. 2 years earlier, a junior analyst at his firm had experienced a pregnancy scare and pulled that exact box from her purse in a panic. The image had burned itself into his memory. A pregnancy test. An icy chill shot through him, colder than the soaking wet coat in his hands. Something wrong. Elena was still digging through the suitcase, her voice tight with frustration at not finding whatever she was searching for. Nothing. Marcus's throat felt constricted, his voice strained. He walked faster toward the balcony, almost rushing to hang the coat. When he released the cold fabric, his fingertips remained numb. He turned back toward the living room. Elena had pulled several items out, fully exposing the small white box in the dim light. She hadn't noticed his stare, or perhaps she simply didn't care. She finally located a small cosmetics pouch and extracted it, shoving the suitcase aside without bothering to zip it closed. The white box lay there among her belongings, stark and accusatory as a gravestone. "I'm going to shower, I feel disgusting," she said, stifling a yawn as she headed toward the bathroom, her steps unsteady with exhaustion. The bathroom door clicked shut. Moments later, the hiss of the shower drowned out the relentless drumming of rain. The living room fell silent except for a cheerful commercial blaring from the television. Blue light washed across the floor, illuminating the open suitcase and the damning white box within. Marcus stood motionless. The chill from moments before had transformed into white-hot fury twisting in his gut. Blood roared in his ears like a tidal wave, drowning out the television. His heart slammed against his ribs like a trapped animal desperate to escape. He moved slowly, his limbs stiff, and knelt beside the suitcase. His trembling fingers reached for the box. The cool cardboard touched his skin. He wrapped his hand around the small, light object. The packaging was covered in text. He didn't need to read it all. His eyes locked onto one phrase in the digital results example window: pregnant 3+ weeks. 3+ weeks. 3+ weeks. 3+ weeks. Marcus mouthed the words silently, grinding them between his teeth. A timeline flashed through his mind with brutal clarity. Elena's business trip had lasted 4 weeks and 3 days. She'd been home for less than 24 hours. A bitter, metallic taste flooded his mouth as though he'd been chewing rusty nails. He squeezed the box tighter, its corners digging painfully into his palm. The sharp sting was the only thing preventing the roar of rage from bursting out of his chest. The shower continued running. Slowly, very slowly, Marcus lifted his head and stared at the frosted bathroom door. Behind it, Elena's silhouette was a blurry, shifting shape in the steam. He watched that shadow, and his lips began pulling back from his teeth in a grotesque approximation of a smile. It wasn't truly a smile, it was the flesh peeling back to reveal bone beneath. A low, guttural sound caught in his throat. Perfect, he whispered, the broken word swallowed instantly by the sound of running water. Absolutely perfect. He relaxed his jaw, his tongue tracing the edge of his teeth. He could taste the faint salty tang of blood where his nails had broken the skin of his palm. He kept his eyes fixed on the bathroom door, his gaze as cold and still as a frozen lake. The television's blue light flickered across his face, ghostly and cold. Chapter 2. The bathroom door opened. A cloud of warm, fragrant steam, expensive body wash, billowed into the cool living room. Elena emerged wrapped in a thick white towel with another turban around her head. The steam had flushed her cheeks pink, and she looked relaxed, almost serene. So much better, she sighed, dabbing at the ends of her hair with a hand towel. The water pressure at that hotel was pathetic. This feels amazing. Marcus was back on the couch in his previous position, one leg draped over the armrest, remote in hand. The television cast its impassive blue light across his features. The white box had vanished, silently wedged deep into the crevice between the seat cushion and the sofa back. "Yeah, we've got excellent pressure," Marcus replied evenly. He looked at her, his gaze lingering on her face for a fraction of a second before sliding away to the still-open suitcase. "Did you get everything out? You should put that suitcase on the balcony to air out, it's damp." "Right." Elena remembered the luggage and walked over to zip it shut. She ignored the pile of clothes beside it and dragged the suitcase toward the balcony door. She didn't notice the secret hidden in the couch, nor did she detect the glacial, assessing quality in Marcus's eyes as he watched her back. "Are you hungry?" "I can heat up some of that soup from last night," Marcus offered, his tone suggesting nothing more than routine spousal care. "No, I'm fine," Elena waved dismissively. "I had a snack on the plane, all I want is sleep. I feel like my bones are going to fall apart." She released a massive yawn. "I need to go into the office tomorrow to submit my expense report. It's going to be tedious." "Then get some rest." Marcus stood and clicked off the television, plunging the room into near darkness except for the faint glow of the entryway nightlight. "I'll get the guest room ready, you're exhausted, and I don't want to wake you up later." "You don't have to do that," Elena said, surprised. "You snore like a freight train when you're this tired," Marcus said flatly, already walking toward the guest room without breaking stride. Elena stood speechless for a moment. She rubbed her nose, muttering, "I do not," but didn't argue further. She was too exhausted to care. Watching Marcus's back disappear into the guest room, a flicker of unease brushed against her consciousness. But the overwhelming wave of exhaustion washed it away. She shook her head, telling herself she was just overtired and paranoid. She entered the master bedroom and closed the door behind her. Click. The soft sound of the latch was deafening in the sudden silence. Inside the guest room, Marcus stood motionless just inside the door, a statue carved from shadow. Darkness enveloped him, broken only by the thin sliver of light seeping under the door. He waited until he heard Elena shifting in bed, followed by the deep, even rhythm of sleep. Only then did he turn silently and return to the living room couch. He sat on the edge in the darkness, cold seeping up from the floorboards through his slippers. With slow, deliberate motion, he reached back into the crevice of the couch. His fingertips brushed against the hard, cool plastic of the pregnancy test. He pulled it out. In the darkness, he couldn't read the words, but they were seared onto the backs of his eyelids. Pregnant. 3+ weeks. He stared down at the small, weightless box in his palm. Then his fingers began closing around it, his knuckles turning white with strain. The plastic groaned and buckled, its sharp edges digging into his flesh. Something warm and wet seeped between his fingers, blood or sweat, he didn't care. The only sound in the darkness was his own harsh, ragged breathing. The emotion churning inside him wasn't merely anger or sadness. It was something colder, thicker, like toxic sludge poisoning the very air around him. He bared his teeth in a silent, savage grin that only he could feel. His jaw ached from clenching. Perfect. This was absolutely perfect. For years, he'd thought he'd built something solid. Turns out the foundation had been rotting the entire time, eaten away from the inside. He thought of the locked drawer in his home office. He hadn't opened it in years. The key was tucked into the spine of a thick, unread copy of Das Kapital on the top shelf. Marcus rose, moving like a phantom through the apartment. He entered the office, slid the rolling ladder over, retrieved the book, and slipped the small brass key from its hiding place. The lock turned with a soft click. The drawer contained a few items, an old flash drive, some legal documents. He reached beneath them and pulled out a large, heavy leather-bound photo album. He carried it back to the living room as though transporting a gravestone. He sat on the floor, leaning against the cold leg of the sofa, and opened the album on his lap. It was filled with pictures from their very beginning. Awkward college students grinning beneath a cherry blossom tree. Their first vacation, laughing as they ran from ocean waves on some generic beach. Their wedding day, fumbling with rings, their eyes full of a light he now knew was false. The day they moved into this apartment, exhausted but happy on the bare floor. Last winter, building a lopsided, ridiculous snowman in the park. In every photograph, Elena's smile was radiant, her eyes clear. She had been his son, the person he'd thought he would spend his life protecting. Marcus's fingers, cold as ice, traced the outline of her face in one photo. The woman in the picture smiled with such warmth, such apparent sincerity. And today, her suitcase contained a test proving she was carrying another man's child. 3+ weeks into a 4-week business trip. His body began trembling, not from cold, but from the toxic fury boiling inside him, searching for a way out, scorching his insides. He snapped his eyes shut, took one deep, shuddering breath, and opened them again. Nothing remained in them but dead, frozen calm. His hand moved with brutal, surgical precision. Rip. The harsh sound of tearing paper shattered the silence. He grabbed the first photo, their wedding, and ripped her smiling face from beneath the plastic film. He tore it like worthless trash. Rip, rip, rip. Again and again. He stopped looking. His hands moved with mechanical violence. Dig in, grab, and tear, faster and harder. One by one, the images of their shared happiness were mutilated. The ring exchange torn in half. The snowy day reduced to twisted scraps. Every embrace, every shared smile ripped to shreds. The fragments of their life together fluttered down like black snow, landing on his lap, the floor, the backs of his cold hands. He was a demolition expert standing in the ruins of his own life, taking sick, destructive pleasure in leveling it completely. Finally, he reached the last page, a candid shot he'd taken a few months ago. He'd brought her a small gift from a trip, and she'd turned to the camera, her face lit with surprise and delight. In the background was the very couch he now leaned against. Elena's eyes sparkled in the photo, her smile bright. Marcus's hands froze. He stared at the picture, at those eyes that had once captivated him. His fingers trembled at the photograph's edge. The only sound was his own breathing, heavy and labored like a caged animal. He stared at Elena's face, a low growl building in his throat. The violence he'd suppressed all night finally broke through its dam. 2 words forced through his clenched teeth, raw and venomous, scraping his throat like broken glass, "Fucking bastard." The whisper was a blade in the darkness. He raised his hand, no longer tearing but clawing, and drove his fingers into the smiling face in the photograph. Chapter 3. The first hint of dawn, weak gray light, filtered through the curtain gaps, illuminating the wreckage scattered across the living room floor. Torn photo scraps lay everywhere like dead leaves. The crushed white pregnancy test box lay among them, obscene evidence amid the ruins. Marcus had remained on the floor all night, propped against the sofa, his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept. When he heard the first sounds from the master bedroom, he moved. He stood, his body stiff, and walked to the kitchen, ignoring the destruction. His steps were steady, almost unnaturally quiet. The refrigerator door opened soundlessly, its interior light casting a sterile glow on his expressionless face. He removed a whole organic chicken, a handful of dates, goji berries, and fresh ginger. His movements were methodical, precise. He rinsed the chicken, quartered it, blanched it, all with the detached focus of a surgeon. He placed a heavy Dutch oven on the stove, added water, the chicken, and smashed ginger. He lit the gas, and a ring of blue flame licked the pot's bottom. He covered it and turned the heat to low. Soon, a gentle simmering sound filled the kitchen, patient and slow. The bedroom door opened. Elena emerged, rubbing her eyes, her hair disheveled. Her gaze fell upon the chaos in the living room, the shredded photographs, and at the center, the mangled white box. She stopped dead. Sleep vanished from her eyes, replaced by shock. Her pupils contracted, and color drained from her face. What is, she stammered, her eyes darting from the floor to the kitchen. Pure, unadulterated panic seized her expression. Marcus was adding dates and goji berries to the pot. He didn't turn around. Did I wake you? His voice drifted out, calm and even. I'm making you some soup. Elena stared at his back, then back at the floor. Cold fear squeezed her throat, choking off her words. She stumbled forward and knelt, her hands shaking as she tried gathering the photo pieces. The pictures. What happened to the pictures? She asked, her voice trembling. Marcus replaced the pot lid and finally turned, leaning against the kitchen doorway. He stood with hands in his pajama pockets, posture relaxed, but his eyes were like scalpels dissecting her pale face, her trembling fingers, the damning white box on the floor. What's wrong? He tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching into a faint, cold smile. Did you see something you weren't supposed to? The words hit her like a physical blow. She flinched, dropping the photo scrap she was holding. She instinctively tried covering the white box with her body, a clumsy, futile gesture. No, nothing, what are you talking about, she said, her voice shaking, her eyes darting away from his. I just don't understand why the photos are destroyed. Marcus said nothing. He simply watched her. His stare was so calm it was terrifying, as though he could see straight through her lies to the ugly truth beneath. In the kitchen, the pot simmered steadily, the sound amplifying the suffocating silence. The weight of his gaze was unbearable. Elena scrambled to her feet, her voice becoming shrill with forced indignation. Marcus, say something. What is this? Did you tear up our photos? Did you find out? The last words were a desperate gamble. Find out what? He repeated quietly, but each word landed like a hammer blow. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately. His slippers made a soft, rhythmic sound on the tile. His eyes never left her face. Find out that my devoted wife, on a business trip lasting 4 weeks and 3 days, he stopped a foot from her, looking down, his voice dropping to a frigid whisper. Comes home with a device in her bag detecting a pregnancy of 3+ weeks. An explosion went off in Elena's head. Her last shred of hope was annihilated. Her legs gave out, and she grabbed the sofa back to keep from collapsing. No, it's not what you think, Marcus, let me explain. Fear pitched her voice high, cracking it with unshed tears. It was an accident, just a stupid mistake, it only happened once. I was drunk. I don't even really know who he was. The excuses tumbled out, incoherent and desperate, as tears streamed down her face. Oh. Marcus let out a short, sharp sound, half question, half scoff. He leaned close, his face inches from hers. He could smell the same body wash he used on her skin. Drunk, he repeated, his voice a whisper sharper than a razor. Once. You don't know who he was. He allowed a soft, chilling laugh. Elena, that lie is so cheap. The word cheap was a whip lashing across her soul. And the baby, Marcus stared into her wide, terrified eyes, enunciating each word with chilling clarity. What are you planning to do with that bastard you're carrying? Bastard. The word was a branding iron. She flinched violently, her hand instinctively flying to her flat stomach as if to protect it from his venom. She stammered, drowning in shame and fear. She looked into his cold, merciless eyes and felt absolute despair. She shook her head wildly. I'll get rid of it, Marcus, I'll get an abortion. I'll go to the clinic today, right now. We can just pretend this never happened, okay? She grabbed the sleeve of his robe, clinging like a drowning woman. Never happened. Marcus looked down at her hand, at her white knuckles. Then slowly, deliberately, he pried her fingers off his arm one by one. He stepped back, his eyes lingering on her stomach for a moment, cold and analytical, as though studying a contaminated specimen. What's the rush, he said suddenly, his voice returning to that strange, placid tone. It was almost gentle. The soup's almost ready. He turned and walked back into the kitchen, leaving her frozen in the living room, a broken, weeping statue amid the ruins of their life. In the kitchen, the Dutch oven continued its soft, steady simmering. The rich, fragrant aroma of chicken and herbs began filling the apartment. Marcus stood at the counter and picked up a bowl. He lifted the heavy lid, and steam billowed up, momentarily obscuring his face. He ladled the golden, bubbling broth into the bowl. He bent his head, blowing gently on a spoonful of soup. Then he raised it to his lips and took a small sip. It was hot, rich, and savory, with the sweetness of dates and a hint of ginger. He smacked his lips softly, then turned his head to look at Elena, still standing paralyzed in the living room. He gave her a smile that could almost be described as tender. Chapter 4. Marcus sat at his usual place at the head of the dining table. Elena sat at the opposite end, the table's length a chasm between them. The air was thick with the sweet, cloying scent of chicken broth. Elena stared down at her lap, her fingers twisting the fabric of her pajama pants. The steaming bowl of soup sat before her like an indictment. She hadn't touched it. Marcus stirred his own soup with a spoon, the picture of calm. Why aren't you eating? He asked, breaking the suffocating silence. Elena flinched. She looked up, met his placid gaze for a second, then quickly looked down again. I'm not hungry, she whispered. Not hungry, he repeated. He paused, letting the words sink in. You're not just eating for one anymore. You're eating for two now, you should have something. Eating for two. The words were needles in her heart. Her face grew paler. She snatched up the bowl and, shutting her eyes, began gulping the soup down as though it were poison. The hot liquid burned her throat, but she didn't stop until the bowl was empty. I'm done, she said, slamming the bowl down. Her voice choked with tears. I'm going to get dressed for work. She scrambled up from the table and fled to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Marcus sat alone, looking at the empty bowl. The smile faded from his lips, leaving behind an icy mask of indifference. He picked up his phone and opened an encrypted folder. It was filled with photos of a single man, young, with slicked back hair and a smug grin, wearing the polo shirt of a well-known tech company. There were pictures of him giving presentations, laughing at a coffee shop, and one clearly taken with a telephoto lens in a dimly lit bar with his arm wrapped tightly around a woman's waist. The woman was Elena. She was looking at him, her face relaxed, a hazy smile on her lips. Marcus stared at that photo for 10 full seconds, his eyes as cold as a winter sky. He swiped out of the photos and opened a PDF file. The title read, Pacific Northwest Diagnostics Lab Report, Client ID, PND, DT20244315. The name on the report was Dylan Torres. Marcus scrolled quickly through the blood work, his eyes scanning the data like a hawk. He stopped at the final section, Sexually Transmitted Disease Panel. Syphilis antibody, TPPA positive, plus symbol. RPR titer, 132, reactive. HIV antibody screen, negative, minus symbol. A handwritten physician's note followed, diagnosis confirmed for syphilis, primary stage. Recommend immediate consultation with infectious disease specialist. Avoid sexual contact to prevent transmission. The date on the report was March 15, 1 week before Elena's business trip began. Marcus looked at the screen, at the word positive, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He exited the file and opened his contacts, finding a name, Sullivan. A low-level logistics coordinator at Nexus Tech, Dylan Torres' company, a man who saw everything, heard everything, and owed Marcus a favor. Sullivan picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Mr. Reid." Sullivan's voice was slick with surprise and deference. "What can I do for you?" "Morning, Sullivan," Marcus said, his voice smooth, almost friendly. "I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Mr. Reid, you name it." "It's not about the vendor contracts," Marcus said, his eyes still on the lab report. "I have an acquaintance at your company in marketing, Dylan Torres. Seems like a real go-getter." "Torres?" Sullivan paused. "Oh yeah, the new team lead. Bit of a hotshot. He's a friend of yours." "Something like that," Marcus said casually. "Thing is, my acquaintance seems to be having some health problems. Picked up a nasty bug." He let the words hang in the air. "Oh yeah. Serious?" Marcus sighed dramatically. "Not life-threatening, I think, just the messy kind. Syphilis. Positive result. I don't know all the details, you know how it is with young guys, careless." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by stunned silence. "Jesus Christ," Sullivan finally whispered, his voice a mixture of shock and salacious glee. "Syphilis? Positive? That slick bastard, you'd never know it. He was running a meeting just yesterday." "I'm just worried about him," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. "And I'm worried about other people. A thing like that is contagious, right? You're a well-connected man, Sullivan. I was thinking maybe you could discreetly let a few people know so they can be careful. Would be a shame if it spread." "I get it, totally get it," Sullivan sounded practically giddy. "Consider it done, Mr. Reid. This is huge. Don't worry, by lunchtime, everyone will know to stay away from Dylan Torres. Disease like that. Good. Thanks for your help, Sullivan." "Anytime, Mr. Reid." "Oh, and Sullivan, this conversation never happened," Marcus said, and hung up. He put the phone down and picked up his chopsticks, plucking a cold date from his untouched soup and chewing slowly. Then he picked up his phone again and opened his email app. He composed a new message to the anonymous HR tip line for Nexus Tech. Subject: Urgent Health and Safety Risk, Employee Dylan Torres. To whom it may concern. This is an anonymous but verified tip from a concerned party. It has come to my attention that marketing team lead Dylan Torres, employee ID 0128, recently received test results from Pacific Northwest Diagnostics, dated March 15, 2024, confirming a positive diagnosis for a highly contagious sexually transmitted disease, syphilis, RPR titer 132. While respecting employee privacy, this condition poses a significant public health risk to colleagues through close contact. Mr. Torres has not disclosed his status and continues engaging in daily workplace activities. It is strongly recommended that management take immediate action to mitigate transmission risk within the office, urge the employee to seek treatment, and evaluate his fitness for his current role. Failure to act could expose the company to significant liability. This information is provided in the interest of employee safety. A concerned colleague. Marcus's finger hovered over the send button for a second. Then he pressed it. Message sent appeared on screen. He then went to his photo gallery, selected the picture of Dylan and Elena in the bar, and opened his text conversation with Sullivan. He stared at Elena's smiling, oblivious face in the photo. A flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes before they settled back into a cold, dark void. He hit send. No caption. A moment later, he picked up another date from his bowl and began chewing. It tasted sweet. From the bedroom, he could hear the faint, muffled sound of Elena crying. Chapter 5. The 17th floor of Nexus Tech was a tomb. The air hummed with servers and frantic keyboard clicking. Everyone stared at their screens, but every eye was on the glass-walled office of Dylan Torres. Dylan paced like a caged animal, his face a mask of purple rage. His monitor displayed the company's anonymous Slack channel, renamed #Biohazard Containment. Messages flew. At Anonymous Badger, holy shit. The rumors are true. Marketing's golden boy has syphilis. At Anonymous Squirrel, no way. That's slander. At Anonymous Raccoon, it's real. Source says Pacific Northwest Diagnostics. March 15 report. RPR 132. Super contagious. At Anonymous Opossum, he shook my hand yesterday. I'm going to bathe in bleach. At Anonymous Fox, here's proof. A blurry screenshot of the lab report appeared, followed by a much clearer image, Dylan in a dark bar, his arm around a woman's waist, his face uncomfortably close to hers. At Anonymous Bear, whoa. Isn't that the finance consultant from that client account? Elena something. She's married. At Anonymous Deer, so that's where he got it. Screwing around with a married woman. At Anonymous Wolf, he brings his disgusting habits into the office. Fire his ass. HR, management, do something. We don't want to catch his filth. Dylan slammed his fist on the desk with a deafening crack. Who did this? He roared, snatching his coffee mug and hurling it against the glass wall, where it exploded in a shower of ceramic shards and brown liquid. His office door opened. The HR director and the company's general counsel walked in, their faces grim. Dylan, the HR director said, her voice like ice. Please calm down. We need you to come with us to the main conference room. Now. Dylan's rage collapsed into sheer terror. It's a lie, it's all a lie, he stammered. We have a copy of an email, Dylan, the lawyer said flatly. And a lab report. Let's go. Dylan Torres, the office hotshot, deflated into his chair, his face the color of ash. He was finished. Meanwhile, at Elena's firm, the break room was buzzing. Did you hear what happened at Nexus? A woman whispered, her eyes wide. That marketing guy Dylan Torres, the one Elena was working with. What about him? He has syphilis, the woman hissed. It's all over their internal network. And guess what? There's a picture of him getting cozy with a married woman, and it looks a lot like her. Eyes in the break room darted toward Elena's cubicle. Elena stared blankly at her computer, her mind a maelstrom of shame and fear. Her phone lit up, a call from Dylan Torres. Her heart leaped into her throat, her hands shaking. She fumbled to decline the call, but in her panic, her thumb slipped and hit the green answer button. The call went to speaker. Elena. Dylan's voice, a raw, unhinged scream of pure hatred, blasted from the phone speaker. The entire office fell silent. Heads popped up over cubicle walls. Was it you? Did you and your psycho husband do this to me? He shrieked, his voice cracking with desperation. You ruined my life, you bitch. No, I don't know what you're talking about, Elena stammered, her face bloodless. Liar. You and that bastard in your womb can both rot in hell. I'll kill you, I'll fucking kill you. That bastard in your womb. The words echoed through the silent, cavernous office. Every eye fixed on her. Initial shock morphed into disgust and contempt. She was no longer a colleague, she was a spectacle, a piece of filth. A roaring sound filled Elena's ears. A sharp, violent cramp seized her abdomen. A wave of heat spread between her legs. Oh, she whimpered, a small, broken sound. She clutched her stomach as dizziness washed over her. She tried steadying herself on her desk, but her strength failed. She slid from her chair and crumpled to the floor. On the light gray carpet beneath her, a dark red stain was already beginning to spread, blooming like a hideous flower. The office erupted in screams. Oh my God, she's bleeding. Call 911. Amid the chaos, Elena lay on the floor, her body growing cold, her eyes staring at the acoustic ceiling tiles. The only sound she could hear was Dylan's curse echoing in the ruins of her mind, rot in hell. From his corner office, Marcus watched the city lights begin twinkling. He'd just hung up with Sullivan, who'd breathlessly recounted the day's drama, culminating in the news of Elena's miscarriage. She was bleeding all over the floor, Mr. Reid, they had to carry her out on a stretcher. Can you believe it? I know, Marcus had said, his voice calm. Thank you, Sullivan. He hung up. On his desk was a contract finalizing his acquisition of a significant block of shares in Nexus Tech, purchased at a steep discount from a panicked investor. He picked up a pen and signed his name with a flourish. He walked to the bar and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He raised it to his lips, the amber liquid glowing in the lamplight. He drank it in one long, smooth swallow. The fiery liquid burned a trail down his throat, igniting a feeling of pure, unadulterated triumph that spread through his veins like wildfire. It wasn't just relief. It was power, the exhilarating, godlike power of having pulled every string, of watching his elaborate trap snap shut with perfect, devastating precision. A satisfied laugh escaped his lips. He licked his lips, tasting the faint coppery tang of dried blood from the night before, now mixed with the smoky finish of whiskey. It was the taste of victory. This wasn't the end. This was just the appetizer. Elena, he whispered to the glittering city skyline. Your turn. Chapter 6. The smell of antiseptic was overpowering. White lights glared down on white walls and a white bed, bleaching the last traces of color from Elena's face. She stared at the ceiling, a hollowed-out shell, as in 4 drips slowly counted the seconds of her empty life. The door opened. Marcus walked in, looking crisp and clean in a tailored shirt, a stark contrast to the room's atmosphere of sickness and despair. He placed a plastic bag on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice a perfect imitation of a concerned husband. "What are you doing here?" Elena's voice was a raw, broken rasp. "Came to see you," he said, pulling up a chair. "The baby, it's gone," she said. The statement was a dull knife twisting in her gut. Her eyes snapped shut, and fresh tears escaped, soaking the hair at her temples. "Isn't this what you wanted?" she shrieked, her eyes flying open, blazing with hatred. "Are you satisfied, Marcus? Are you happy now?" The movement sent a jolt of pain through her abdomen, and she gasped, sweat beading on her forehead. Marcus watched her, his expression unreadable. He reached into the plastic bag. "I brought you a few things." He removed them one by one, placing them on the table, a package of adult diapers, a box of extra-heavy overnight maxi pads, a container of personal cleansing wipes. The sight of them, so mundane yet so profoundly humiliating, struck Elena dumb. The shame was physical, a hot, suffocating wave worse than the public disgrace, worse than the pain. "Get out," she finally choked, grabbing a box of tissues and flinging it at him. It bounced harmlessly off his chest. "You need to take care of yourself after a procedure like this," he said calmly, as though discussing the weather. "High risk of infection." His eyes flicked down to her lower body, hidden beneath the thin blanket. "Wouldn't want any complications." He continued, his voice dropping. "The doctor said there was significant damage, scar tissue, inflammation. It might be difficult for you to conceive again." He paused, savoring the new wave of horror washing over her face. "But," he added, a cruel smile touching his lips, "that bastard was never meant to be born anyway, so it all works out." A raw, animal scream tore from Elena's throat. She lunged forward, ripping the 4 from the back of her hand. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin. A nurse rushed in. "What's going on?" "Ma'am, you need to calm down." "I'm sorry, nurse," Marcus said, his voice full of regret. "My wife is just emotional about losing the baby." The nurse's expression softened with pity as she retaped the 4. Once she left, Marcus stepped closer. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on top of the box of diapers. "You should probably see this too." With trembling fingers, Elena unfolded the paper. It was a copy of Dylan Torres's lab report, syphilis antibody, positive, dated March 15th, the week of her one-time mistake. Violent, wrenching nausea seized her. The men she'd slept with, the father of the child she'd just lost, was diseased. The filth of it all, the sheer, idiotic squalor of her betrayal, consumed her. She doubled over, dry heaving, gasping for air. Marcus watched her, his face a blank canvas. When her retching subsided into weak, shuddering gasps, he leaned down, his lips close to her ear. "See," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin, "the men you chose didn't just give you a bastard, he almost gave you a disease." He straightened, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. "Your judgment, Elena, it's flawless." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her to drown in the wreckage. The downpour was biblical. A black sedan cut through sheets of rain and pulled up to the curb. Marcus got out, opened a large black umbrella, and walked to the passenger side. He pulled the door open. Elena was huddled in the seat, swimming in an old oversized coat he'd brought for her. She looked like a ghost. "Get out," he said. She didn't move. With a sigh of impatience, he reached in, grabbed her arm, and hauled her out of the car. She stumbled onto the wet pavement, icy rain instantly soaking her. He dragged her into the building and up the elevator in silence. The apartment door was already open. Lights were on, bright and sterile. His lawyer stood in the living room. In the center of the floor were 2 large suitcases stuffed to bursting with all her belongings. "All your things," Marcus announced. "Check them if you want." This is my home," she whispered. "Home?" Marcus laughed, a short, ugly sound. "This stopped being your home the second you let another man knock you up." The lawyer placed a thick document on the coffee table. "Ms. Hayes, this is the divorce agreement. It includes a waiver forfeiting your claim to all marital assets. Please sign here." "No," she breathed, backing away until she hit the wall. "No." Marcus's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "Don't make me remind you, Elena. Don't make me leak the details of your affair, the lab reports, the miscarriage. Think about what happened to Dylan Torres. Do you want that, or worse?" The fight drained out of her. Terror was absolute. "I'll sign," she rasped. She crawled to the table and scribbled her name, a spidery, illegible mark of surrender. "Good," Marcus said, taking the papers. "Now take your things and get out." He kicked one suitcase. "Get this trash out of my life." She tried to stand, to pull the heavy suitcase, but her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the floor, fresh pain shooting through her abdomen. Marcus watched her fall, his face impassive. Then he walked to the balcony, slid the glass door open, and let the storm howl into the room. He turned and, with a vicious kick, sent a cardboard box of her books and pictures spilling onto the rain-lashed balcony. A framed photo of them in college shattered against the railing. "Take the garbage," he said, and walked into his office, shutting the door. Somehow, Elena found the strength to move. She crawled, dragging the heavy suitcase behind her, leaving a wet trail on the floor. She hauled herself and her luggage to the door, each movement agony. The rain outside was merciless. She stood at the threshold, looking back one last time at the apartment that had been her home. The lights were bright and cold. The space already looked like it had never been hers. She stepped out into the storm. The door slammed shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty hallway. The lock clicked. Inside, Marcus stood at the window, watching the rain. In his hand was a glass of whiskey, amber liquid catching the light. Below, he could see a small figure struggling with 2 suitcases, disappearing into the storm. He raised the glass to his lips and took a slow sip. The warmth spread through his chest. On his desk lay the signed divorce papers, her trembling signature stark against the white page. Next to it was the contract for his new shares in Nexus Tech. Everything was going according to plan. He walked to the living room and began gathering the torn photographs from the floor. One by one, he collected the shredded pieces of their life together and carried them to the kitchen. He opened the trash bin and dropped them in. They fell like confetti into the darkness. The crushed pregnancy test box was the last thing he picked up. He held it for a moment, staring at the mangled cardboard. Then he dropped it into the trash and closed the lid with a soft thud. He returned to the window. The rain continued its relentless assault on the glass. The city lights blurred into streaks of color through the water. Marcus stood there, perfectly still, perfectly calm. The apartment was silent except for the drumming of rain. It was finally clean. He finished his whiskey, set the glass down, and walked to his bedroom. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new victories. Tonight, justice had been served.